Mel Gibson walked onto the View set expecting tension, but not chaos. The co-host assumed they'd dismantle him on national television. But what unfolded left everyone in disbelief. One composed sentence flipped the entire atmosphere, and by the end, the crowd was applauding while the hosts were frozen. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss moments like this. The stage had been set like a battleground. The producers labeled it a discussion, but everyone behind the curtain knew better. It was going to be a televised ambush. That morning's rundown listed a sit-down with Mel Gibson, but the energy was anything but neutral. As Mel walked out, he nodded calmly to the audience, took his place across from Whoopi Goldberg, Behar, and Sunny Hostin, and smiled. But the air was thick, so thick it felt rehearsed. Whoopi leaned in with a smirk. Her voice, wrapped in sarcasm, fired the first shot. So Mel, you've been quite outspoken about imposing a 100% tariff on international films. Is censorship and economic isolation your idea of progress now? Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. The camera tightened on Gibson's face. Without blinking, he responded in a cool tone. Back in American labor isn't censorship, it's common sense. A beat passed long and heavy. Then Behar raised her voice. You say it's about jobs, but isn't this just your way of promoting Trump's playbook? Why now? Why you? Mel turned toward her slowly. Because I've watched this industry rot from the inside. I've seen what happens when we abandon our own people, our crews, our communities, our identity. The moment we stop investing in ourselves, we become slaves to outside interests. The crowd stirred, a few claps, a few glares. Sunny Hostin wasn't going to let him off that easily. You want to talk about culture? She shot back. Let's talk about your past. You've made racist, sexist comments, and now we're supposed to believe you're the voice of integrity. It was a sharp hit, a calculated one. Mel didn't flinch. I've made serious mistakes, and I paid a heavy price. But I'm sitting here because I didn't run from it. I faced it, and I'll keep doing so if it means fixing what's broken. The studio held its breath. Silence. Then a single clap. Another. The energy was shifting. Whoopi tried to bring the heat back. Tariffs won't fix your reputation. You're building economic walls. But what about the personal ones you built? That's when Mel leaned in closer. Voice lower but firmer. You don't break down walls by yelling. You break them by listening even to people you don't agree with. You could feel the air change. The co-host had come in ready for battle, but they underestimated something. They forgot Mel Gibson doesn't back away from a storm. By the next segment, the panelists looked rattled. Their script said light political banner, but the room felt like a powder keg. Joy fidgeted with her cards. Sunny whispered something to Whoopi. The camera kept rolling. Mel remained still, fingers tapping the armrest, not in defiance, but in complete control. Joy pushed forward. Let's talk economics. A 100% tariff. That's extreme. Isn't that just going to start trade wars and drive up ticket prices? Gibson nodded thoughtfully. It sounds harsh, sure, but you know what's harsher? Watching studios send post-production overseas, hire cheaper foreign crews, and gut American workers for profit. That's not competition. That's sabotage. He turned toward the audience. If we don't protect our talent, Hollywood will become a museum, empty and irrelevant. A few cheers rang out. The cameras didn't pan to the crowd, but backstage producers were sweating. Sunny leaned in sharply. That's not capitalism, Mel. If you can't compete, maybe you're not adding value. Mel's jaw twitched. Capitalism only works when it's fair. This isn't fair. It's a rigged game, and workers lose. Every time, Whoopi jumped in, trying to steer it back. That sounds like union talk. Then I guess I'm pro-union. Mel shot back. Because the people on set, the boom mic guy, the editor grinding until 3 a.m., they're not flying private jets. They're paying rent in a town that forgot about them. Silence again, then clapping. Louder this time. Then Joy reached for her Trump Carter printed quote from one of Mel's past interviews. You said, America needs to stop pretending globalism is the answer to everything. Really? He didn't even glance at the paper. Yes, so. Isolationism, she asked. No. Mel replied, realism. We've let globalism become a cover for exploitation of labor, of trust, of identity. I'm not saying build a wall. I'm saying stop selling our soul. It hung in the air like a challenge. Sunny wasn't convinced. Sounds like a populist PR stunt. Mel leaned forward, calm but focused. I'm not running a campaign. I'm telling people they deserve better. It hit different, not because he was winning an argument, but because he wasn't playing the game they expected. Suddenly, Joy's voice softened. We'll be right back. As the camera panned out, You could see it. The co-hosts were on the defensive. They were out of moves and they knew it. The commercial break ended, but the shift lingered. The producers were in damage control, whispering through headsets, waving for applause cues. It didn't matter. Something intangible had broken loose, and Mel Gibson wasn't just pushing a policy anymore. He was reclaiming the conversation. Sunny didn't waste time. Let's not rewrite history, she said. There are people who believe you don't deserve a platform, period. The tension returned. Mel exhaled, steady. I'm not asking to be forgiven. I'm saying I'm here. And I own it. All of it. I was reckless, angry. I hurt people. I've apologized. But I'm not owed anything. Some heads in the audience nodded. Mel continued. I came knowing you'd bring this up. And you should. Because you can't grow by pretending the past didn't happen. You grow by confronting it. Over and over. And proving it doesn't own you anymore. Again, the silence was respectful, not fearful. Joy tried to pivot. How do we know this isn't just a PR move? Mel smiled faintly. You don't. If I wanted applause, I'd be promoting a new action flick. Not sitting here arguing. About tariffs. Even Whoopi chuckled at that. But Sunny had one more shot. You say you've changed. But this whole flag-waving nationalism, doesn't that sound like the same Mel Gibson? In a new costume. That was the moment. Mel leaned forward, voice steady, but resolute. It's not tough to love your country. It's not extreme to want it to stand on its own feet. What's extreme is pretending we can keep sacrificing values for profits. And what's weak is being so afraid of labels that we forget how to stand for something. There was a beat, then applause. Stronger, sustained. The crowd wasn't clapping for perfection. They were clapping for conviction. Whoopi looked back at her notes. Next we'll talk about Hollywood. But Mel gently cut in. We already are. She raised an eyebrow. Mel looked right at the camera. When your industry treats people like stats, when honest voices get labeled dangerous, when only overseas revenue matters, that's not entertainment. That's control. That last line hung heavy in the air. We should all be concerned about that. Not even Joy interrupted. Sunny didn't push back. And in a rare moment of unplanned silence, the producers didn't flash the cut signal, no. One expected him, Mel Gibson, to be the one talking about control. And certainly not like that. As the camera pulled back for another commercial, the expressions on the host faces told the real story. Gibson wasn't just answering questions. He was seizing the conversation, taking back the mic. By the time they returned for segment 3, the control room had given up pretending this was going smoothly. Social media was already on fire. The show's live tweet ticker was lit up with polarizing hashtags, some praising Gibson's candor, others blasting The View for losing grip on their own platform. But none of that tension made it into the smiles on camera. Whoopi came back on screen, a forced grin plastered on her face and fingers laced tight in front of her. Let's talk Hollywood, she said, trying to reset. You've been very vocal about the industry turning its back on America. But haven't you, more than most, benefited from that same system? Mel leaned back slightly, now visibly more relaxed. I have, he said without defensiveness. And that's exactly why I'm speaking out. Because I've seen what happens behind the curtain. I've watched how priorities shift, how storytelling gets replaced by propaganda, how real talent is overlooked to push agendas. Sunny cut in. So you think Hollywood's broken? Mel shook his head. No, I think it's scared. Joy raised an eyebrow. Scared of what? He didn't miss a beat. Scared of becoming irrelevant. Scared of honesty. Scared of the very people it claims to speak for. A low murmur spread through the audience. One person in the front row started clapping, then stopped, unsure. Mel leaned forward. We used to make movies that challenged power, really challenged it, that asked dangerous, uncomfortable questions. Now, the moment you even question the narrative, you're branded as toxic, dangerous, outdated. He glanced across the table. I've been called all of those things. But the one thing I won't be is silent. Whoopi tried to wrangle the tone back. Isn't this just accountability? The world's changed. People expect more. I'm not against accountability, Gibson said flatly. I'm against selective accountability. We act like redemption's a myth, something we dangle for some people, but deny others. You either believe in second chances, or you don't. You can't sell forgiveness and cancel it in the same breath. That one landed. Even Joy blinked. Sunny saw her opening and took it. Isn't it convenient you're saying all this now, when you've got nothing left to lose? Mel looked directly at her. You're right. I've lost a lot, reputation, opportunities, friends. But I haven't lost my voice. He let that sit. And that's what makes people nervous. The audience erupted this time louder. Applause, whistles, even a few cheers. And for the first time since the interview began, the co-host looked genuinely unnerved. Not because Mel Gibson had said something shocking, but because he hadn't. He was calm, measured, honest, and worst of all for them, he was being heard. Whoopi tossed a commercial with a tight smile. We'll be back in just a moment. But everyone watching knew the moment had already happened. When they returned, it wasn't just the lighting that felt different. The air had changed. The audience, many of whom had come in expecting drama or damage control, were now leaning forward. Arms crossed, brows furrowed not in disapproval, but curiosity. Something rare was happening. Joy, clearly unsettled, tried to regain her footing. Okay, she said, forcing levity into her tone. Let's take a break from politics for a second. Let's talk about your career. You've had big wins and very public failures. Why come back now? Mel looked around, then locked eyes. With her? Because we don't have time to wait anymore, he said plainly. This industry, this country is at a breaking point. And if the people who've seen it from the inside don't speak up, who will? Another murmur. Sunny pounced. You're saying Hollywood's collapsing? He turned toward her, calm as ever. Not collapsing. Morphing into something. It was never supposed to be. It used to be about stories. Now it's about slogans. And when everything becomes a message, no one hears the truth anymore. Whoopi looked up, something flashing behind her eyes. So what's your truth, Mel? He didn't hesitate. That every artist, every worker, every American deserves to speak freely, to create, to disagree, without being blacklisted for it. That free speech doesn't stop the moment someone gets uncomfortable. That loving your country isn't hate, and patriotism isn't extremism this time. The applause wasn't polite. It was real, spontaneous. Even Joy looked genuinely surprised. Mel continued, you want diversity in Hollywood? Start with diversity of thought. I've worked with people from every background, every belief. But the one thing that gets shut down fastest is an opinion that strays from the script. Audience members were nodding now. Phones out, recording. Sunny, arms folded, took her shot. And what about your narrative? What about the damage you've caused with your words, your past? Mel nodded slowly. I live with that every day, and I should. But growth doesn't mean hiding. It means showing up, especially when you know not everyone believes you've changed. He turned to the audience. If I came here to be liked, I'd have played it safe. But I didn't. I came because this matters. Because what we say in rooms like this echoes far beyond them. Silence. Then applause again, louder this time. A few people even stood. Joy raised her hands, half laughing. Okay, we get it. Mel Gibson is trending. That broke some of the tension. The crowd chuckled. But the atmosphere had shifted. The audience hadn't turned against the view. They had simply turned towards something else. Something that felt real. And the host knew it. The next segment was coming fast. The producers were in full scramble mode, cutting topics, rewriting prompts, urging the panel to lighten the mood. But it didn't matter. The momentum didn't belong to the show anymore. It belonged to Mel. No one expected The View to lose control of its own show, especially not to Mel Gibson. When he first opened up about control and propaganda in Hollywood, Joy didn't interrupt, Sunny didn't challenge, and even the producers didn't flash a commercial cue. It wasn't just surprising that he was talking, it was the way he was talking. Calm, measured, unapologetic. By the time they hit the third segment, everyone on set knew the show had gone rogue. Social media caught fire. The live tweet feed split into half praising Gibson's candor, the other half wondering how the producers let this happen. But on camera, the tension was buried under professional smiles. Whoopi tried to steer things back with a question about Hollywood's betrayal of American values. Gibson didn't flinch. I have benefited, he admitted. That's exactly why I'm speaking out. He didn't just criticize Hollywood, he diagnosed it. It's not broken, he said. It's scared. Scared of being irrelevant. Scared of honesty. Scared of the people it claims to represent. The audience murmured. Someone clapped. Sunny pressed him. You think Hollywood's collapsing? Mel shook his head. No. It's evolving into something it was never meant to be. A place for slogans instead of stories. Then came the real zinger, Whoopi's attempt to frame his words as deflection from accountability. Mel didn't dodge. I'm not against accountability, he replied. I'm against selective accountability. You either believe in second chances or you don't. Even Joy flinched. Sunny saw her opening. Isn't it convenient you're saying all this now, when you've got nothing left to lose? Gibson didn't hesitate. You're right. I've lost a lot. But I haven't lost my voice. The audience erupted not in protest, but in support. Cheers. Applause. the kind that throws an entire production into disarray. Then it got worse for them. Joy tried to pull things back. Okay, let's step away from politics and talk about your career. But Mel wasn't interested in nostalgia. We don't have time to wait anymore, he said. This industry, this country is at a breaking point. It wasn't hyperbole. It was momentum. Mel had seized it, and the co-host could feel it slipping away. When asked what America needed, Mel answered, truth. Even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. The room fell still. We don't need safer spaces. We need braver conversations. He wasn't ranting. He wasn't angry. And that's what made it hit harder. Joy countered with the idea of consequences. Mel agreed, then pivoted. We've lost the distinction between disagreement and harm. We've made discomfort a crime. The silence was seismic. And then came the line that reset the room. We've convinced ourselves that only one side gets to define what offensive means. No yelling, no grandstanding, just a clean, surgical strike. Then a voice from the crowd. Let him speak. Applause. Cheers. The panel was no longer steering the conversation, they were chasing it. Whoopi asked if this was all just a comeback stunt. I don't need a comeback, Mel said. I need a country that hasn't forgotten how to forgive. Sunny's face flickered. The line landed. You don't have to like me, Mel told the audience. But if you think canceling every flawed person makes the world better, you're not helping. You're hiding. A slow clap. Then many. Then the whole room. The co-host had lost control. The producers scrambled off-screen. Questions were rewritten. Closing statements adjusted. But the momentum, that was Mel's now. Whoopi tried to wrap it cleanly. Anything you want to leave our audience with. Mel delivered one final blow. Don't let the loudest people in the room decide what you're allowed to think. Don't hand over your voice to people who claim to speak for you left or right. Hollywood or DC, once you give it away, you don't get it back. It wasn't a mic drop. It was a warning. Joy rushed to lighten the moment. Thanks for your candor. But Mel wasn't done. He turned to the host and said what everyone suspected. I know why I was invited. You thought you'd teach me a lesson. Remind me I don't belong. But I don't need to belong to be right. Then he stood. So did parts of the crowd. He walked off calmly, leaving behind a table in shambles and a studio forever altered. The segment hadn't just gone off script. It had shattered the script. Online, it was instant. Mel Gibson flips the View on its head. The moment the audience turned. One sentence that shut down the panel. The episode ended. But the real show was just beginning. As Mel Gibson stood and the crowd rose with him. It wasn't just another viral moment. It was an eruption. Social media platforms lit up like flashbangs, threads, think pieces, and reaction videos flooded in within the hour. Twitter, Reddit, even the mainstream echo chambers couldn't ignore it. The divide was clear, but the attention wasn't. No one was talking about the View's message. They were talking about his. Some praised him as a truth teller with backbone, a man who didn't dodge when it would have been easier to disappear. Others dismissed it as performance art, a soft-spoken provocation dressed in calm resolve. But there was one undeniable fact. Mel Gibson hijacked the conversation. And he did it without raising his voice. By early afternoon, headlines stampeded in. Mel Gibson hijacks the View and wins the room. Daytime TV shaken, poise, silence, and a sentence that stuck. Gibson doesn't flinch. The View doesn't recover. Back inside the studio, the aftermath looked more like triage. Producers huddled over raw footage, debating which clips to officially upload and which ones to quietly bury. Interns were ordered to patrol the comment sections, where a staggering percentage of responses tilted toward Gibson. A leaked internal email said it all. We brought him on thinking we'd frame him. Instead, he reframed us. Behind the scenes, Joy Behar was reportedly livid, not because she hadn't heard dissent before, but because this time, it didn't fall apart. They had aimed every rhetorical weapon they had: moral history, ideological traps, political bait. He sidestepped all of it without breaking form. Sunny Hostin left the studio in silence. No post-show Instagram recap. No MSNBC soundbite. Nothing. Whoopi Goldberg, always the calm center of the storm, was overheard muttering to a producer. He didn't take the bait. That, more than anything, seemed to rattle him. And Mel, he vanished. No follow-up interview. No social media victory lap. No post, no podcast clips, no curated thread, just quiet, which only made it louder. By nightfall, late-night comedy shows took aim. Some mocked Mel. Some mocked The View. But even the satire couldn't ignore the truth. Something seismic had happened. And no one on that panel had stopped it. The next morning, The headlines hadn't slowed. Clips from the show crossed the 10 million mark in under 12 hours. Cable pundits played back key exchanges like they were breaking down game tape. But one line got played more than any other. We've convinced ourselves that only one side gets to define what offensive means. Not because it was slick, because it was right. And everyone, even those who hated hearing it, knew it. He didn't evade. He didn't grandstand. He didn't fall. Instead, he entered a space engineered to dismantle him and expose the idea that control of the narrative is stronger than clarity of message. But the real story wasn't on TV or Twitter. It was in homes. People who had long written Gibson off were replaying the clips, pausing to talk about them. Families who hadn't had a political conversation in months were now debating what he said. Some agreed, some didn't, but they talked. That was the point. One progressive journalist, previously a vocal critic, tweeted, "I'm no fan of Mel Gibson, but today he showed more guts than I've seen on TV in years. Calm, honest, no venom. That's rare." Another, a film crew union rep, posted, "He said what everyone's thinking and didn't make it a circus." Meanwhile, the view went dark. No behind-the-scenes footage. No highlight reel, just a bland, heavily ratioed tweet. "Thanks to Mel Gibson for an honest conversation." That tweet said everything they wanted a moment. They got a movement. And Mel, he disappeared back into quiet. No gloating, no brand rollout, no podcast announcement. Because the point wasn't the spotlight. The point was the sentence. Say one thing. Say it clearly. Leave it behind. In an age where shouting earns airtime and rage fuels relevance, Mel Gibson did the unthinkable. He whispered, and the world listened. Because he didn't win by yelling. He won by refusing to play the game.